Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this interview series all about MKU. Today I'm joined by Associate Professor Ruth Massie, who's also Education Lead for MKU. And we are here to talk about MKU's educational approach, how it came about, and all things education. Thank you so much for joining me, Ruth.
Thank you for having me.
Great, amazing. I'm so excited to talk to you about MKU's education. There's just so much to cover. So I hope we can be brief, but also that we can go into quite a lot of different things that the listeners or viewers may not know about. Just to start off, it would be amazing to hear about your background and how you kind of came to Cranfield. What's your kind of background at Cranfield, as well as how you came to be on the MKU project?
So I've had a long association with Cranfield. I was very lucky. I was a Cranfield undergraduate a number of years ago, and I then went into industry and spent a long time doing business continuity and then later on strategy development. And then I got the opportunity to go back and do my PhD at City University, and then eventually I was lucky enough to get a job down at our Shrivenham campus. And then after 4 years down there, I joined the School of Management and then very quickly onto the MKU project. So I've been at Cranfield 8 years this week, actually.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Can you tell me a bit more about your role as education lead at MKU? Because, it sounds quite, I guess, varied. You probably get involved in a lot of different things. It would be amazing to get to know that role a bit more.
So my role is a really varied role, which I really enjoy. And I deal with all of the sort of the areas around the courses that have to be set in place. So everything from working with our policy and procedures kind of teams, our quality teams, working with our AV and technology teams to make sure we've got the right technology, working with the course leads as well to make sure that their courses are the right ones and that they've got what they need to deliver those courses. So yeah, it's very much a coordination role and making sure that all of the different parts are coming together to make sure the education is delivered to the standard that we expect.
Amazing. Let's dive into the education approach, because I know that the model for MKU is kind of very different. It's all about the university for the future. I know we also have different kind of pillars of education that we've come up with when we first designed the approach. Why the 4 pillars? First of all, cover what the pillars are, and then tell me why those 4 pillars.
So we have 4 pillars. The first one is management and entrepreneurship. Second one is digital and data. Then we have engineering, robotics, and finally design. So those 4 pillars really came out of the very early work that was done, looking at what Milton Keynes' strengths were and where there was gaps in the market. And it was really about making sure that we were looking at future-orientated employability roles. So making sure that all of the courses and the pillars that they relate to are all about that employability and sort of modern 21st century roles. So that's where the 4 pillars came from. Each of the pillars have a slightly different narrative and what they're trying to do, as you'd expect. But all of them are sort of underpinned by professional skills and making sure that the apprentices all have a good basis and that they are work ready. And I'm sure we'll talk more about the professional skills as we go through. But they came about really because of the needs in both the local and the national area, and a lot of work that was done in the early stages.
Yeah, no, that's amazing to hear that. And obviously, again, with the pillars and what you just explained, our model is now very much focused on apprenticeships. Yeah. Why apprenticeships? Why not full-time degrees? Why not kind of maybe different models, but apprenticeships to start with?
So apprenticeships to start with, partly because Cranfield are very good at apprenticeships. They've got a really great reputation in doing apprenticeships. But also it was a way of making sure that we understood what industry wanted, and the apprenticeships are obviously through the trailblazer process of how they're developed. It's very much about talking to industry, so that really played into the MKU narrative around being close to business, working with business and understanding and fulfilling business needs. There's a lot of call for people to upskill, particularly in the digital areas and the management areas. So these were kind of natural places for us to start. So that's really why the apprenticeships is where we're starting, but we are definitely going to grow larger than just apprenticeships.
Amazing. And obviously, just for those viewers who don't know, we've got apprenticeships in cyber security, digital and technology solutions, data science, and chartered manager.
Yeah.
Why those four? Because they sit within two different pillars, you know, the kind of, you know, the business pillar and also in the digital and data pillar. But why have you decided to start with those four?
So we started a long time ago. We were very lucky that we got what was then HEFKey, a grant from them to look at education and innovative education. And part of that was to look at actually three different topics. There was cyber, entrepreneurship and robotics. So we evolved from there. So the cyber obviously has stayed as being the cyber one. Entrepreneurship, there isn't an apprenticeship standard, as you'd imagine, around entrepreneurship, but the management apprenticeship that we run is very entrepreneurship orientated to really give those kind of skills for both internal to their organisation as well, because internal entrepreneurship is just as important as the sort of traditional concepts around entrepreneurship. The other one, robotics, there wasn't a trailblazer, there wasn't a standard for robotics, so we're just in the process of submitting a trailblazer application to become to launch a robotics apprenticeship as well. But the other ones, the data science and digital and technology solutions, were really customer led. They were really, you know, conversations with industry about what was really urgent, and those the four apprenticeships, including the management one, were very much about what business felt was urgent needs, and we'll grow into the other ones as we have chance to grow.
Oh, that's amazing. And just kind of to build on what you just said, in terms of, you know, the business and relevancy, you know, our tagline is designed for business, you know, for business. So how do we make sure that it is actually really relevant for business?
So we've worked really hard on this. There's a few things. We did a number of what we called skills gap workshops beforehand, which helped us narrow down the subjects, and then within the subjects, what were the topics that were really important. We worked very hard with them to identify what the graduates needed to look like, and then sort of design the course back from that, rather than the sort of traditional of, you know, here's what we've got to do. Very much looking at what does that output need to look like. We then went on and looked at how we can make sure that we keep that relevant, and I know we'll come on to it, but we've decided on an educational approach called problem-based learning, which is about taking industry problems and getting the apprentices to actually look at them and study them and work through those problems, and really building their curiosity and their critical thinking skills and those kind of things. But it's very much about still having those conversations all of the time with business about what's important, and talking to the employers who have sent us apprentices, getting their staff to come and talk to the apprentices as well, and really making sure that we're just keeping on top of that industry relevance.
Yeah, no, that's really important, because especially in the kind of in the space that we're sitting in, there's just so much change constantly, isn't it? Technology, you know, there's new thing every year, so
Absolutely.
you really have to make sure that you keep on top of that. So, you know, I don't know, you know, probably viewers, again, they may not know that we've got this amazing facility in Milton Keynes, Bouverie House. It's got amazing technology there. You know, we've been lucky enough to be able to bring amazing AV. Would you be able to tell me a bit more about what is the role of technology in learning?
So to do that, I need to take a step back and talk about problem-based learning. So we chose problem-based learning because of it's building curiosity, it's building that critical thinking. And what you do in that is you set the students, as I said, a problem. Then that's where the technology then can really help us to help them work through the technology, using the technology to really investigate the problem, to make sure that they've got the sort of, we do a lot of, it's all group work. So we've got some really fantastic setups of something called Mentor in the Centre, where the apprentice works, and they work in groups of typically about 4 or 5, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller, depending on what we're trying to achieve with them. They work through the problem, they're using the technology to research that problem or progress that problem. So it might be that, you know, they're using the screens to share information with each other. They're using, you know, really high quality equipment to do that investigation stages. So it's really all part of that one education narrative of making sure that we've got the technology that meets the education design, which meets the industry need, and really that being a full narrative together.
Yeah, you explained brilliantly what problem-based learning is, and that was like my next question anyway. But leading from what problem-based learning is, why problem-based learning?
So right at the beginning, one of my very first activities I did when I took on the education lead was actually sit down and say, what does education mean at MKU? And we wrote some underlying philosophies around what the learning approach was and what the assessment approach was, because these two are obviously completely intertwined with each other. But one of the things that came through really strongly from industry was the need for the apprentices to be curious. Not just here's a whole load of rote things that I want you to just learn. I'm going to stand at the front and go, here's a 3 hours worth of PowerPoints. Do you all get it? Yes, right, let's move on. It was about building their curiosity, but in parallel with that, building their critical thinking. So they're not just taking, here's a problem, let me Google it, let me take the first answer off Google and that will do. It's about, what does that mean, that why and how and when, and really fostering that curiosity so that when they're back in industry, they're not just accepting things, they're trying to innovate, they're trying to improve, they're trying to make sure that everything they do really is for the best and the best that they can do it. So once we'd sort of worked through some of those underlying principles about that curiosity, critical thinking, but also teamwork. Teamwork is so important. We all work in teams all of the time, and those teams are multifaceted. It's very rare these days, I think, people work in a team where it's just people in their same expertise. It's normally working with users or suppliers or HR or IT or whoever it might be. So actually teaching them those team working skills as well. And that's one of the reasons why we picked problem-based learning, is it pulls all of those things in together. It also meant with the assessments, we could do what we call authentic assessments, by which I mean things which are real in their world or potentially could be throughout their career. So we asked them to do, so for example, in the module I'm going to be teaching this year, they're going to be developing a tender document, because that's something that we actually get them to do. So it's about making sure that we meet that industry need, but we're using the technology and the educational tools to really develop those skills. And really that lifelong learning. And one of the things you mentioned a minute ago about, being up to date, we were very conscious with things like cyber and digital and data science. At the beginning of an apprenticeship, we might be teaching one aspect, but that might be incorrect by the time they graduate, just because technology is moving so fast. So giving them the skills to learn enables them to stay up to date and build that curiosity and that lifelong learning.
Oh, that's great. No, that's so important. I think a lot of institutions they really forget about that, learning and really emphasizing that kind of learning aspects of being a lifelong learner and really kind of going through your career and really progressing and making sure that you don't forget about a learning aspect. We always have something new to learn, don't we? But it would be interesting to also hear, because it's problem-based learning. It's not that common. We do 100% problem-based learning. Was it a bit tricky to actually make sure that we can meet all the knowledge, skills and behaviours that are normally listed within the standard with this approach?
Yeah, so yes, it is. So the beauty of problem-based learning is you set them a problem, typically at the beginning of a day, but it might run over a number of days. And then you then take them through a very set process, which we've developed, and they work through that problem. Now that means that they can go in any direction, and when you've got, say for example, 6 different groups, you will get 6 different answers, which is fantastic, and they can learn from each other. It does mean that we have to really carefully structure those problems though, and a lot of work has to go into thinking about what the problem is, what it is you're trying to do, and how will you ensure they get through to the outcomes that they need to. But there's many flavours to problem-based learning. There's a huge number of flavours, which means we had to spend a lot of time looking at the different flavours, and we've developed our own MKU, which has taken what we think is the best bits from all the different flavours. But the most important step in that is actually at the end of the day, where we get them to reflect back on what they have learned over the day, or subsequent number of days if it's a longer problem. Then we get them to say, well, actually, how does that apply to my workplace? When and where might that be appropriate to my workplace? And that's the most important stage, because that's the point where we say, we intended you to look at these KSBs, knowledge, skills and behaviours. Then we've worked you through the exercise, and they have led that exercise. They are very much the leaders in that. And then at the end of the day, we take it back through that reflection phase and say, well, okay, this is what we hope to learn. And that's where they say, well, actually, we also, might have covered on this KSB as well, or, this was really interesting. So yeah, it's really about making sure that the management of the session happens, so the students get the fullest opportunity to really expand and explore those KSBs.
Amazing. And then in terms of facilities as well, I know you mentioned that, you know, we do have a lot of technology and that it really supports their learning. Is it essential? You know, can you do problem-based learning without all
Absolutely.
the technology?
We've been really lucky that we've had this new building, we've been able to kit it out, and we've got different types of technology in different spaces. So we're also being able to experiment a little bit with the different spaces as well. And problem-based learning is fantastic when you have the technology, but equally, all I need is a room and desks and some Wi-Fi for the apprentices, and they can really, you know, whatever they want. And sometimes we take them into the sort of the lower technology spaces and still have a fantastic day with them, and they still get the same learning opportunities. So whilst it's fantastic to have the technology and we all really enjoy using the technology, it can be done in a low-tech way, and sometimes that can give them different learnings as well, because sometimes we want them to focus on the conversations and less on the technology. Sometimes we want them to focus on the technology and how that works, and so yeah, we can really vary what we're trying to achieve out of the sessions, not just in terms of the technical content of the module, but in the lifelong learning skills that we're giving them as well.
And again, from your experience so far, how are the apprentices finding the problem-based learning? Does it work for them? Do you think that they get in, you know, are they hitting all those knowledge, skills and behaviours, and they really, or is it, you know, really about making sure that the facilitator or the person who's running that session is really kind of giving them that nudge towards one KSB or another? Or are they really, you know, from the experience so far that we've had, are they really able to kind of go through the process without too much hand holding and really kind of flourish in the problem-based learning format?
Absolutely. So what we found is you do have to teach them how to do the problem-based learning, and you have to invest time in that. And for their first module, we're very rigorous around the process and making sure that they get into that routine, they understand what's expected of them, because this is harder than sitting in a lecture. Sitting in a lecture for a number of hours and just listening to someone, the hardest thing you have to do is try and remember to concentrate. Whereas in problem-based learning, you are an active participant in your own learning. So that takes a little bit of adaptation, you know, particularly most people's view of a university these days is, you know, the kind of the big American universities you see on sort of the big films and stuff like that, where it's a lecture theatre of 300 students and things like that. Well, actually, this is a much smaller group. Typically, our classes are up to, it varies, but can be up to sort of about 60, 70, that kind of number. And they are all actively participating in that. So they have to learn a lot more skills around that. We are quite routine with it in the early stages, and then as they get into more advanced modules, we ease off and let them lead more of the sessions and drive what they want to do as well. And as we get them into the level 5s and level 6, so the equivalent of second and third year of undergraduate, then they will get more freedoms, but they'll still be using that same problem-based learning framework.
Tell me a bit more about the employer involvement on the problem-based learning. You know, how much input are we able to introduce, you know, from employers into our curriculum, and how does that work?
So what we're doing, we've got apprentices in their level 4, so they're sort of first year at the moment. That's more academic led, as we give them the skills to be ready. As they get into the level 5 and level 6, more and more of their problems will be generated either by business and sort of as academics working with business and saying, you know, this is the knowledge, skills and behaviours we want to cover, this is, you know, the kind of areas, and then getting business to give us the problems. And then as they get into the level 6, we would expect them as apprentices to be bringing more of their own problems. So it's a journey that they're on as they go through, from being quite supported through it, through to, you know, working on bigger problems, working on more complex problems, through to actually generating their own problems. And this is what we'll see as they go through. So it's a really exciting journey as problem-based learning. It takes a little while for them, as I say, for the apprentices to get kind of used to it. But once they're in the swing of it, they really buy into it because they can see how it's making a difference and the skills that they are learning as they go through.
Yeah, I love how they, as you said, it's all about that personal kind of journey and kind of ownership of your own learning. Like, you really need to make sure that, you know, you're progressing, and, you know, we are here to support you. However, it's really, you know, it's with you, and whatever kind of learning you receive, you know, the impact will be greater if, as you said, you're progressing nicely through the level 4 into level 5, and then in your level 6 it's really all about you kind of bringing things from your organisation and making sure you can apply that learning and yeah, so it's a fantastic journey for them.
It's one of the bigger things with apprenticeships as well, particularly is making sure, you know, that learning journey. We talk a lot about their learning journey. One of the reasons we picked apprenticeships, to go back to one of your earlier questions, was because that learning journey is kind of intrinsically embedded in an apprenticeship, and so us learning from that will give us the opportunity when we have more, shall we say, traditional students to take those skills that we as an academic team have learned through launching the apprenticeships into those open courses as well.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear that. And then just to, again, I know at the start you mentioned the professional skills, and I think it's you know, an amazing thing that MKU has designed into the curriculum. You know, you said about it like underpinning everything that we do, and you know, it being really important for the concept of MKU. Can you tell me a bit more about professional skills and, you know, how, why, and you know, how it's done and what's covered?
So professional skills really came out from, I mentioned the skills workshops. So what would happen, they were typically about an hour long with the workshops, and we would ask a series of questions, and what would happen in pretty much, well, in fact all of them, was we would have about 5 minutes of them saying, oh, technically they need to maybe know this piece of software, or they need to know about this concept and things like that. And then the rest of the 55 minutes were along the lines of, but we need them to be employable. We need them to be able to go in front of clients, or you know, answer the phone, or, you know, all of these kind of things, work with teams. They needed them to be curious. They needed them to actually think critical and not just, you know, take the answers. So there was a lot of those kind of things, and it became very obvious very quickly that actually this isn't something that you do as an add-on. This is absolutely core. And when you look at the knowledge, skills and behaviours, those behaviours are very much about those professional skills as well. So that's a narrative that joined up really well. But it was really interesting talking about what actually professional skills did they want, did industry want? And this really varied. We had hundreds of different opportunities and different concepts. And the ones we settled on are quite varied to give the apprentices the opportunity to see that they're varied. And they are sort of in three categories. So there's things about themselves, so their own emotional intelligence, their own understanding, things about just being in business. You know, particularly for our younger apprentices, it's important that they understand what a budget is and why they might care about budget codes and those kind of things, through to, you know, we do a session with them on intellectual property rights, because if they're developing things for a company, should they be protecting these and how could they think about that? So there's those kind of business skills in there as well. And then there's the kind of lifelong skills as well, like the ability to critically think, to be able to really think about their own lifelong learning skills, that kind of educational side. So, and understanding who they are. You know, they go on, the apprentices particularly go on a very personal journey as well as the academic journey as they go through this. So the professional skills was about making sure that we grow that side of them as well. We decided very early on that this should be full credit, not something that should be an add-on that they might want to do if they maybe have 5 minutes. So we've actually built it in as a core element of the curriculum, and all the apprentices do it. And as for the open courses, everyone does it together as well, so they get to mix in with other companies, other organisations, but also people on different apprenticeships as well. So that gives them the opportunity to really hone those skills. When I was talking about team working earlier, the fact that we work across departments, you know, giving them through the professional skills the opportunity to do that. So they do 15 credits of it at level 4, another 15 credits at level 5, and then we've folded in their professional project. So what would traditionally we think of as their honours project, we've made that much more professional orientated, and that sits in their professional skills as well.
Oh, great. No, it's amazing. Another big part, I think, and as you said, you know, industry is just really crying out for those skills, but how do we make sure that, you know, with young apprentices who are 18, you know, 19, they come in and it's their first introduction to both job and also to education, you know, they really require a lot more support. And as you said, you know, those essential skills around, you know, how do I pick up a phone and how do I feel comfortable with all these different kind of business areas? But we also have apprentices who are in their kind of later stages of their career where they may be upskilling or reskilling into a different role. How do we make sure that those professional skills are still very much relevant for them?
So that's a really good question and a really important question. What we found is actually for a number of people, particularly where they're upskilling or transferring from one industry to another, that actually their needs are not dissimilar to those who are entering the workplace as well. The other thing we found is particularly where we've got mixed cohorts, the post-experience students, so those who are a few years into working, are really good at supporting our new employees, and vice versa, they're really supporting each other. What we've done is we've got quite a variety of different topics, and all of our academics and all the guest speakers, we talk to them about, who are they going to be in front of them before the session, so they know, how to tone the conversation as well. So we spend a lot of time actually getting to know our apprenticeships and the different apprenticeship groups that we've got as well, and making sure that we kind of understand that, and therefore we can tone it. Also really encouraging them to feel that they're a safe space for asking questions, and that's where they get a lot of the value. And we really encourage, and maybe if we're doing, say, a webinar on a topic around it, we encourage the speaker to only speak for sort of half an hour, 30 minutes in that hour, and really getting those conversations going through getting the apprentices to either look at a problem or ask questions and really engage. And again, it comes back to that, they're an active participant in their learning journey, so they all take away something different from it.
I think it's an amazing concept to, as you said, mixed the more experienced apprentices and the younger ones, and really see what they learn from each other, because often I think younger generation can come from that kind of more innovative approach. They have more innovation to them, but then obviously the older apprentices, they'll have a lot more experience, and they will be kind of have tackle those problems from a completely different perspective, and really go through this apprenticeship together. It's an amazing opportunity for them to really learn from each other, and it will vary from, as you said, from cohort to cohort, because it can always, you can never guess who comes through our doors, but at the same time, it's an amazing thing that we build thinking around that, and trying to really encourage them to not be afraid to ask those questions, and to really encourage each other to think differently around this. Just to kind of talk about, the education, everything else, we can't forget about delivery method, and the things that that we do is, again, with apprenticeship model, it's 80 to 20 approximately, 80% of their time now with their employers, 20% of their time approximately they'll be spending with us, that off-the-job training. We've done it slightly different. Can you tell me how and why?
So we did a lot of research into what the delivery model should look like, and there's a lot of tradition around it, and we wanted to really look at those traditions and understand why, day release or online or in person, what works for different groups. So what we've done is we've designed a bookend structure. So for example, for a 30 credit module, which is the bulk of our modules, they'll come in and do a few days with us, typically 3, but it will vary slightly. So they get that immersiveness. They get to come in, work with the other apprentices, get to know and really build that cohort, because they'll have different people coming from different courses and things like that. They'll spend typically about 3 days immersing themselves in that topic. They'll then go away, and then we'll do online, about 6 or 7 online days, spread over a number of weeks, where they get to keep going with the topic. We only do one topic at a time, which makes a really big difference. But they work on those individual days as a group, working on the topics. They then come back together again at the end. So you've got what we call a bookend structure. So you've got sort of 3 days at the beginning, 6 days online, 3 days at the end. So they get immersed at the beginning and the end, but they still have that time to sort of learn at their own pace in between, which is the best of both worlds. Day release has a great thing that people have, routine around it, but they get, they really have to kind of dip in and out of what they're doing. They don't get the immersive experience. Whereas if they come for sort of those bookend bits, they get that immersive experience as well. So it's a really great compromise, or not even a compromise, it's an optimization of the options. It also means for businesses, because they're only out of the business for 3 days, it's not a full week, so it's a little bit easier for them to manage logistically. And then the other days are online, so they don't have to travel every week. So we're not limited to just people who live within a sort of an hour's commute of Milton Keynes. It means that businesses can open it up to employees anywhere in the qualifying areas, which is pretty much England and some of Wales and Scotland for some elements.
Yeah, so that's the mode, isn't it? The blend, really, to really provide that kind of varied experience, and to really, with the new hybrid working and what we do everywhere, it's really to giving them that option, or I guess, although it's fixed days, we still provide that great blend of both kind of face-to-face and online, because, why not online or why not face-to-face? Someone could ask. Could you tell me why what was the thinking process behind it?
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously learned an awful lot through COVID. I hate to say the C word, but COVID, we've learned a lot, and we launched a university, a new institution in the middle of that. It was kind of lots of rapid learning, and what we did learn very quickly was the groups that had been together pre-COVID, who had created that cohort, did actually better online than those who had to create the cohort when they were already online. So we took some of that learning, for example. We've learned a lot of skills about education online and how to do that. Those all academics across the country, in fact across the world, have upskilled massively on that very, very quickly. But what we really wanted to do was look at what was the optimum for the apprentices. So that the bookend approach of having them come together and be together and get to know each other and get to know each other's strengths and each other's weaknesses and how they can help each other and really become a team, really works very well when they're all grouped together, they're all in together. But once they've established that, they can then work very successfully online, and then that coming back together at the end helps them really, particularly with the assessment elements, which are typically later on in a module, as you'd expect. But it really helps them to have that bond as a team. So yes, hybrid is a great way of doing it, but this kind of blended approach really enables us to provide the optimum environment for the apprentices to really learn and take that back into their workplace with minimal disruption to their workplace as well.
I love how much thinking went into every single bit of the education model. I just love hearing about it, because you can tell there's a lot of kind of effort and thought process behind it to really make it optimal for both the apprentices as well as the employers. So it's very much driven by that, by the industry as well as really what's best for individual, isn't it? But just to kind of round up and sum up the conversation, I'm keen to find out what's next, for MKU in terms of education, because we talked about the 4 courses that we have at the moment. I think there are some things coming up in the future. Tell me about, are there any plans to shift in terms of, the delivery or educational model, or is are you happy with it as it is? Are you taking feedback and you think of redoing something or changing or tweaking it, or are you kind of doing your thing and then you're looking at different courses now and expanding towards different I guess programs that we could offer?
So first thing, feedback. We're taking a huge amount of feedback. We're taking feedback from the apprentices themselves, obviously, their employers, because that's a really important part of the relationship. We're taking feedback as well from the academics and the industry guests, and just pretty much anyone who's had anything in any way to do with MKU. We're taking feedback and listening to that. Now, as usual with feedback, some of it complements each other and some of it completely contradicts each other, which is always interesting. So trying to make sure that we're working through that. The other thing we wanted to do was make sure that we've given things enough time, particularly as, like I said, we launched in September last year, where we were still kind of in the peak of all the COVID madness, and some of it needed a bit of post-COVID, fingers crossed, sort of time to bed in. So taking a little bit of time to just, not do knee-jerk reactions. That said, we've already made some adaptations. There's already things where we've been through a module, we're running that module again for the next intake, and we've already made adaptations to, really make sure that we are delivering what we promised on. Going forward, it's always going to be a watching brief. Feedback is just really critical. We ask the students to feedback on themselves and really reflect on themselves, and that's a skill that we're definitely developing in-house as well, and making sure that we are as reflective as we expect our apprentices to be. So really taking that forward. In terms of other courses, we've got lots of ideas. Nothing firm I can announce at the moment, but we've definitely got a number of ideas. So at the moment, we've obviously got 4 level 6 or degree level apprenticeships. There are some very interesting level 4 and level 5 apprenticeships that we are looking at and market testing at the moment. Like I said, we've got the robotics trailblazer. So we're hoping that that will go through the IFATE process successfully. It's all looking very good. And then we should be able to launch that when we have facilities for that, which shouldn't be that far off. But yeah, really, I think my next thing is really looking at the design pillar. We've got a couple of ideas. There's a couple of apprenticeships in the design pillar that we're looking at launching as well. So lots and lots of choices and lots of opportunities, but really spending a lot of time talking to the market and just making sure that we're on the right track.
And obviously thinking about apprenticeships, but then potentially full-time courses in the future and how that could look like. I know it's still, we very much ultra focused on apprenticeships, and that's where we we really feel like we're really passionate about apprenticeships, and we want to make sure that we keep growing in that space. But again, kind of, I think, exciting opportunities in the future.
Absolutely. So one of the next big things is the Office for Students registration for open courses. That's going to take up a fair chunk of time to get that through the process. Open courses, we talked very early on, and part of MKU sort of design, some of those philosophies we're thinking about was about being inclusive by design, so looking at different ways of delivery. So there's been some successes in the industry, in the education industry, around 2-year degrees, so looking at those, looking at longer opportunities, looking at opportunities where people can fit it in with their lifestyle, because I think that's really important. Many people didn't get the opportunity at 18 to go to university. Now they might have family commitments and things like that, so making sure that MKU really sticks true to that inclusive by design, so making sure that when we look at the open courses, that we're considering lots of different types of students, not just 18-year-olds, they're very traditional, but making sure that we're catering for a broad range, which might mean accelerated degrees, but it also might mean slowed down degrees as well, so that people get a longer opportunity to do some of those things.
Oh wow, amazing! Yeah, we could chat for ages. There's always so much more we can cover, but I think if we kind of finish up here, and potentially in the next 6 months or 10 months or 12 months, we can do maybe a second one and talk about maybe post launch of robotics and how that's going, etc. So it'd be great to do one more of those. But yeah, for this episode, we're pretty much done, and it was great to have you here with us and listen to Ruth and her amazing ideas around education and how MKU approach shifted through it's the concept as well changed for the last 12 months, I guess. And yeah, thank you so much, and we hope you join us for the next one. Thanks.